Hello, and welcome to Love Your Liver. This is a podcast where we talk about all things liver and give our livers just a little bit of extra love. My name's Gina Viliotti Madison, aka Maya Valentine, and I'm super excited to have with me today Kristin Kirkpatrick, who is the author of Skinny Liver. Kristin is the president and CEO of KAK Consulting and a dietitian with the Cleveland Clinic. She is an experienced, sought-after presenter, an award-winning dietitian, and a best-selling author. Kristin has been seen on both local and national shows such as The Today Show, NBC Nightly News, and The Dr. Oz Show, and she has contributed to several national newspapers and magazines. Also with me is Kristin's biggest fan and a member of our NASH Knowledge liver disease support group, Linda Stefano, who lives in Pittsburgh. She's married 18 years, and Linda was diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and NASH in October 2018. So welcome, both of you. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you. What an honor to be on your show, Gina. Thank you so much. And Linda, what an honor to have your title be my biggest fan. I'm just like, come on, doesn't get better than that.
She's your biggest fan, and she uses your book as her Bible as well. So, Kristin, you are the author of the book Skinny Liver that is Linda's Bible, as I just mentioned. But maybe before we go ahead and dive into some of that, if you could maybe just talk a little bit kind of about your path, your journey, what really got you interested in, the liver and making folks aware about liver disease and fatty liver disease in particular.
Yeah. This really started, even though we weren't hearing about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease 35 years ago, I think really the journey started there. I was an overweight, most likely obese child, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor said to my mom, this regular pediatrician office visit, this girl's got insulin resistance, which I didn't know what that meant. Clearly, I definitely had fatty liver myself, but they weren't looking at it at that day. And so I was told that I needed to go see a dietitian. I needed to lose weight. And that was it. There was no other instruction. Just show up, lose weight. This person will tell you how to do it. So I showed up, and here I am, this fat kid, and this dietitian was like 120 perfect pounds, right? Never had a weight problem, never had any issues with food, and I just kind of shut down, right? So I just knew kind of at that very early moment, I have to figure this out, and I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but I got to figure it out. And then I want to get into this profession because I feel like there are a lot of people within this profession that don't understand people trying to lose weight. And if anyone could understand it, it was me. When people ask me how long it took me to maintain the weight loss, I always respond with, I'll let you know when I figure it out. And so I think what kind of got me to this journey is I had started seeing the same trend with all these patients that I had seen at Cleveland Clinic. They would come to me and say, oh, my doctor said I had fatty liver. Oh, what else did your doctor say? Not much. Just go see you. The same advice I had when I had insulin resistance. Just go see you. There's really nothing more than that. And there was no explanation of what it was or how to treat it. And then definitely no explanation of all the things that are outside of eating that impact our weight, right? And so I think all of that kind of got me to the point where I thought, all right, well, there's no guide. And there's a million diet guides out there to just lose weight, but there's none on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the next step I took was I randomly connected with a hepatologist at Cleveland Clinic, who now is one of my greatest friends. And I said, can I shadow you for a while? I'm a dietitian, but I'd really love to see kind of what your patient base was like. And that was kind of the start of all of this. We said, there's a need for this. And anytime you find a need for something, it's like someone once told me, don't write a book if you're only looking to make money. There has to be a need, and you have to have genuine interest in helping people. And that was the best advice that could have been given to me. So that's really kind of what led me down that road. It started 35 years ago when no one had heard of the disease, and it continues on today. And it continues on with this journey of helping people with something that they just don't know where to turn to, and they don't know what to do.
I think that's great because 35 years ago, you got the same advice that so many people are still getting today from their general PCPs or my son and he is on the path to fatty liver disease, so seeing his pediatrician knows a little bit more, but he said that's something that a lot of his colleagues give advice as well, just lose weight. And there's not a lot of information out there. And that's why we started, or my father started our nonprofit organization after his fatty liver disease journey. But even then, he's just a patient, just, one guy trying to kind of get word out there and doesn't have that medical expertise. So I think that's what's so great about your book and what you're doing in trying to raise awareness around this is getting people not just the awareness, but giving them a guide and tools and tips that they can use. So maybe talk a little bit about some of the advice that you give in your book, some of the tips and tools, the trends you're seeing and how that kind of translated into what you're sharing with folks.
Yeah, sure. So let's just start with trends because I wrote this book a few years ago, but the trends have only worsened, right? So we haven't seen any kind of alleviation of the numbers in terms of the global impact of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We know it is still primarily driven by obesity, and obesity is driven by a whole other number of factors. So type 2 diabetes can be that risk factor. Overeating can be that risk factor. So there's some genetic things that we know are the kind of the risk factor, but we know that once we get into an obese state, it's very hard for our liver to kind of catch up to that. And so I think from the prevalence standpoint, we're still around 25% of the nation having non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And very similar to what we see in the statistical analysis of type 2 diabetes, a big bulk of people don't know they have it. Right? So it's just not something that they're aware of, but most likely they do. So fatty liver disease is really when you get over 10% of the liver having fat. And having some fat in the liver is normal, just as perhaps maybe having some fat around an organ is normal. But once you get to a certain breaking point, that's when those risk factors go up. So there's that component. I think it's difficult to do any podcast or any kind of presentation in this day and age without bringing up the pandemic. Because the pandemic has really worsened our numbers. So we definitely see that as well. We see that we've had weight gain in the pandemic. We've seen that we've had excess drinking in the pandemic. And additionally, we have seen a huge chunk of Americans just really missing those annual exams. So really kind of speaking to the fact that many people might have this, that they would have found out this year that they had it and could have started taking changes in order to alleviate it. So as far as tips, one of the things, and I bring this from kind of like, I always say like my fat girl childhood, is to always be real, right? I remember when I was a kid and I was told to be just perfect with my diet. And then I would binge on Little Debbie Nutty Bars, which I never buy anymore or have in the house because we all have triggers, right? And I remember that. And I remember just beating myself up. And so part of beating myself up was I'm going to have more, right? I was so bad. Just forget about the day. It's already ruined, right? So I think like I'm bringing that up because I always like to take a very real perspective. We have to remember as clinicians when we're in front of people that we're not in front of a study, that we're not in front of a case scenario. We are in front of a human being that has emotion and that has challenges and that brings their relationship with food from their childhood, from experiences in life, right? I always joke that when a kid falls off his bike, Mom is never like, oh, let's go right inside and get some broccoli. It's going to be okay, right? That doesn't happen. So we find out at a very early age that soothing and comfort comes with things like ice cream or like a bagel with butter, right? Whatever that may be. So I like that real perspective. From a study standpoint, I do think that there are some great components to the Mediterranean diet that have been shown in multiple studies to be really great for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And really any diet that's going to be beneficial for type 2 diabetes is also going to be beneficial for fatty liver disease. So even some moderate low carb approaches can be really beneficial because we have such strong data now looking at low carb and not no carb. We're not talking about something that's really extreme, but just kind of taking a look at the carbohydrates you currently have, right? In every meal and in every snack and saying, okay, is there what I would call a throwaway carbohydrate? Is there like, I'm having a little bit of cheese, but I'm pairing it with some crackers. And could I increase the nutrient density of those crackers? Or could I take the cracker out altogether and replace it with a vegetable? So really kind of taking that look. And then I think the book is really good in going into all the other aspects. So looking at your sleep habits, your stress, trying to lose weight. It's like this horrible cycle of eating something we're not supposed to, feeling the shame. Now we're stressed about it. We go back to eating that. So there's just so many components, but really it's a book that's trying to get back to the real person and give real life examples of what you can do, because people will not change what is too difficult. And I'm not saying that about generalities. I'm talking about myself as well. People won't change if it's too difficult. And that's a very normal human behavior. So I try and grasp that in the book and, try and grasp the realness of it. And I think at the end of the day, if your diet starts at a place that's really not good, you're told to lose weight, you're told you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you take that in any step you want. If that just means, okay, today I can go and swap my white bagel for a whole grain bagel, that's a great accomplishment. And every week you can do something else. We have to take things at our own pace.
No, I think that's great. And that's what I love, because behavior change is very hard to do. And that's one of the things that we've really kind of shifted our focus a little bit at NASH Knowledge to really talk about family health overall, but talk about what are small little steps that you can do that hopefully over time you continue to do those and make, bigger changes instead of trying to kind of tackle the world at once. And then the other thing that I really love about your book is including stories in there and, people who are like me, people who are similar to me, so that folks can see themselves, in these patients, see themselves in others, because I think a lot of times that's what's so helpful. And that is why, Linda, I think you mentioned that you really were drawn to the book because there were so many stories within there that you could just really relate to. So maybe talk a little bit about that and about how you kind of leveraged Kristin's book for your own kind of disease journey.
Well, when I read the book the first time, it really made me feel that I wasn't alone, because the people's journeys sounded so like mine that I couldn't believe that there were other people out there like me. And when I was reading their story, I felt like I was reading my own. And Kristin's book touched on that. And it made me feel for the first time that there was hope. And that's what was important to me, because I think the journey when I was first diagnosed, I did not have a support group. I didn't have anywhere to turn. And so Google was my friend. And when I typed in there, book about liver, your book was one of the first ones that popped up. And it was the one that made the most sense to me. And that's the one I ordered out of all of the other ones that were there. And it made me feel like I had a resource. And when the stories of the people were so relatable to me, that when I feel like I'm slipping, I open the book up and I reread the stories to get grounded again.
No, I think that's great. And that's one of the many things that I love about your book, Kristin, is that you can see yourself in there. So patients who are going through this, and Linda, I know you mentioned, first of all, you're in our NASH Knowledge liver disease support group. So you have other folks that maybe are new and you can share, your insights with. I know you mentioned also that somebody was recently told they have a fatty liver, and you recommended Kristin's book because you found so much hope in that and you were able to kind of relate. And I think that what I find in my role within our nonprofit is that so many people have similar stories, and being able to kind of connect with others so you don't feel alone. Because I know when my dad was going through his journey, he just felt so alone. He didn't know where to turn. He couldn't find much information out there. And I think it's great that there's more resources out there, but not everybody's going to join a support group, or there's not a support group 24/7. So being able to pick up the book and being able to read that and kind of, like you said, Linda, reground yourself, I think is really great.
And to reground myself, not only do I have the hard copy, but I also have an electronic copy on my phone so that I have the book everywhere I go. I never leave home without it. So it's kind of like having an insurance policy in my pocket.
That's awesome. No, and I think it's great. And I think, one of the things too, so Kristin, you mentioned about diabetes and obesity. And I think diabetes and obesity, everybody knows what that is. They are both kind of household names, but not many people still to this day know about fatty liver disease. I think that's slowly starting to change, unfortunately, because more and more people, the prevalence is increasing. But not only do people not know about fatty liver disease, we find a lot of people are not educated about the liver. overall and not
Right.
always understand kind of the importance of that. And if I may, there's one excerpt in your book that I just would love to read real quickly because I absolutely loved it. It said, the liver is also like the great and powerful odds in that it makes the magic happen from behind the curtain. If you were to picture what happens in your body as a Hollywood movie, your heart and brain would be among the lead actors, but the liver would be the director. It's a silent player behind the scenes, but a powerful one that orchestrates a variety of critical body functions. And that just really, really hit home with me. And I think a critical thing for our audience to understand and know as well is that the liver does have over 500 functions in the human body. So as we see this increase in the prevalence of liver disease, we're seeing an increase in other diseases as well because the liver does impact our overall health. So I don't know if maybe you want to kind of speak to that a little bit and even kind of how that then ties into COVID.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting, when I was writing the book, I would just try and do these focus groups of talking to people and say, well, what do you think the liver does? And the majority of people said, oh, well, when I have booze, it just helps it, it does something with it. So the booze, so it's just like everyone just connects, oh, the liver is there simply for my alcohol consumption and nothing else, right? And so you're absolutely right, is that no, the liver is involved in blood sugar management. It's involved in fatty acid management, in lipid management. It's interesting. One of the things I think about, the body's preferred source of fuel is always glucose, and the stored form of that is glycogen, right? So, I always talk about how amazing the body is. And when the body senses that glucose is running low, glycogen is running low, and it doesn't see any sources coming in. So this can happen when someone's going into a ketogenic pattern, for example. It kind of taps the shoulder of the liver and says, hey, I know I'm not asking you too much all the time, but can you help me out, right? And then actually the liver has the ability to take amino acids from protein and form new glucose. So it's that incredible in the sense of what it can do and the mechanism it has to kind of help us. Now, it's also our detoxifying organ, right? So I've shared very openly when I've written for blogs and when I've written columns and things like that, that one of the things that just kind of irks me a little bit is all the money that people spend on these detox mixes and these detox teas and all these things that are detoxifiers, right? Whereas we were born with the ultimate detoxifier. And if they were to just take that money and then put it towards, let's say, clean, healthy foods, it would be a much better investment. So I think that we have this idea that we know exactly what all the other organs do. I mean, in fact, when I was doing focus groups, people knew more about the kidneys, which is another organ you wouldn't think people know too much about. But the liver is incredible because really once the liver is not functioning to where it needs to function. So once you're in that stage of cirrhosis, which is the last stage of liver disease, nothing's functioning. I mean, there's no coming back from that, right? Unless you have a liver transplant. So I think that's a really important factor, is that we understand that, hey, it is a big deal if you're going to kind of break down this organ. It's a really big deal. It's the only organ we have that can regenerate itself. So sometimes you can get a partial liver transplant and then the liver can regenerate. But I think, Gina, you had mentioned COVID, and most people from a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease component, I've had a lot of patients with this. They would come in, they would say, well, my doctor said this, but he's got to be wrong because I only have one glass of wine every week. So, I mean, that can't be right, right? So I think they're always equating the liver with alcohol in some way. And, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is exactly what it is. This is a disease that has emerged and it has nothing to do with alcohol, right? So that tells you how great the liver is in terms of its importance in the body. 1 in 4 Americans are reporting much greater alcohol consumption since we've been in the pandemic. We've got an average weight gain of 29 pounds. And that can lead to insulin resistance and things like that. So, we're definitely seeing the numbers go in the opposite direction. I was doing a presentation yesterday and I had said in it, there's this panic mode right now because people have been hanging out in their sweatpants and now it's time to put on the work pants. And it's kind of oh boy, this just kind of jumped up at us. Now we're going back into work. And the question is, why did that happen in the first place? And there's a lot of reasons for it, but it has definitely exacerbated the numbers of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I would love to see the data in 6 to 8 months. Now that people are going back to their physicians going back for their annual exams. The other study that came out, and this was just last week, is that of the individuals that are going to their gastroenterologist now, so going back to having regular appointments, 29% of them are showing symptoms that are indicative of liver problems. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has also been the greatest cause today of liver cancer. So it's really kind of taking over. And it kind of goes back to that back to the basics approach that I was talking about, despite the fact that my book is out there and a million books are out there and a million social media accounts. And you can get health information anywhere today. You don't know if it's reputable or valid, but you can. But despite all that information, we remain a very sick and very overweight nation. Yeah. So we're not doing something right?
Kristin, without your book, I would have not been able to get anywhere with the metabolic syndrome that I have. I never even heard of that. And when I read your book and you discussed about metabolic syndrome, and I read about all the symptoms that it includes, and I had every one of them but one of them, I went right to my doctor and I said, I think I have this because I have all of these. But different doctors were treating the different ailments and they weren't putting it together that I had metabolic syndrome. And so when they finally combined them all and said, yeah, maybe you do, they finally put me on metformin for that, which I'm thankful for that. But if I had not read your book and I had not gone in and advocated for myself, I may not still be diagnosed as having metabolic syndrome, and I may not even be on metformin right now. So I have your book to thank for that. It saved my life.
Thank you, Linda, for saying that. I'm glad it did. I can tell already that the world is a better place with you in it.
Linda, on that note, maybe tell us, we didn't really get into your journey much. So maybe tell us, I know you were initially told you had a fatty liver in like 1997, 1998.
I actually looked up my records. It was 2001.
Okay.
And the doctor told me that I had fatty liver. He did not tell me I had NASH, but I had NASH. And they just said, lose weight. And so I lost weight, and then I had moved. And where I live, you don't cross a river. If you grow up in the East, you stay in the East. Well, I moved from the East to the West, and that's unheard of. So I went to a new doctor, and I told him about my fatty liver numbers and the NASH, but I didn't know that's what it was called. I just said that my liver numbers were high. And he said, oh, no, you're too thin for that, because by then I had lost 30 some pounds. And I said, but I still think I want you to check it because I don't know if that really goes away. And he said, no, you're fine. Well, there were some life events that happened, like family deaths. And my problem in life is that I like to self-medicate with food. And so whenever I have a hard time, I'd like to eat. And I had gained a lot of that 30 pounds back. And here we are with the metabolic problem and the liver disease. And in October of 2018, I was re-diagnosed with NAFLD and NASH. And that's when I bought your book. And it wasn't probably until maybe 6 months later, I went into the pharmacy where I get my medicine, and I was feeling really down and sad and alone and isolated, and was talking to the pharmacist, and I had researched online and found this wonderful documentary about silent epidemic, which was Gina's dad. And the pharmacist was telling me that the family that created that video was starting a support group, and was I interested in joining it? Well, of course I said yes. And that's how I started out with them. But it's been a long journey for me, and I struggle with losing weight. And the doctors kept telling me that I wasn't working out enough and that I wasn't eating the right foods. And I kept food journals because I was a Weight Watcher, so they have you track. And I would pull out my tracker and I show them my Fitbit, and I'm like, look, I know I don't look like I work out, but here's my activity. And they were puzzled. They could not figure out why the weight wasn't coming off. And so after 2.5, 3 years of struggling, they finally sent me to a metabolic weight loss center, and they're helping me. And I have a gastroenterologist, a hepatologist, a bariatric doctor, and my PCP, and 2 nutritionists. all working together to help me. And it all started with your book.
Oh, well, that's such a privilege and honor for me to hear that. Thank you.
And that just shows it does take a team, right, as well to kind of, battle this disease. And Linda, like your story, I think I mentioned this earlier, is so common today. When my dad, I know he would talk about when he first found out, and Kristin, you hit on this too, like he found out he had cirrhosis. So he was told he had a fatty liver. And then 13 years later, he just happened to get more blood work with his liver enzymes tested, and all of a sudden he has cirrhosis. And he thought they called the wrong patient. He said, I don't really drink. And my dad doesn't even have one drink a week. Like he probably has 1 or 2 drinks a year. So he really thought they called the wrong patient. Then he couldn't find much information. He felt so alone out there, and it was very confusing. And so I think, again, more folks have a similar story to that it's kind of shocking to them. Like, well, wait a minute. I have this liver disease, but I'm not a drinker. I don't understand. Right. And then they can't find information about it out there.
And I think, your story about your father too is so common. I remember when I was with Dr. Hanane and I was able to shadow with him and see some of his patients. I'll never forget this couple that came in, and it was a very similar scenario. This woman had elevated liver enzymes for the bulk of the decade. And the doctor was just like, let's just keep watching. Let's just keep watching it. Not a lot of intervention whatsoever. And on this particular appointment, he was telling her that they've realized based on some recent tests she had that she had cirrhosis. And she just put her hands in her head and started crying. And the one thing she said, I'll never forget this. She looked at him and she said, so this is all my fault. I did this to myself. And really, it's in a lot of ways, we had a whole discussion about it afterwards. In a lot of ways, the medical system had failed this individual because that person had all the signs, right? All the red flags were there, but yet none of them were taken seriously. And it progressed. And that's what happens with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Never did I want to have a book that was fear-based or to be an alarmist. But I do think it's important that people understand that, yeah, you can live with this for a good amount of time. It will progress if you don't go back to healthier habits, lose weight, things like that. It will progress. We're seeing a huge percentage of new cases now coming in and already being at the second stage, which is fibrosis, where you're really starting to see now we just don't have an accumulation of fat. Now we're getting some scarring, right? So now we're getting some of that type of factor into it. Still reversible, but becomes a lot more challenging. So I think, we really do have to take this seriously. When someone tells someone, oh, there's something wrong with your heart, it's just like, oh, okay, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll get whatever procedure I need. I'll do whatever diet I want. But I think it's part of this whole thing that we don't really talk about the liver. Like I mentioned in my book that the liver was like what Rodney Dangerfield always said, which is like, I can't get any respect. It's just still trying to get respect out there. And meanwhile, as it tries to get respect and we're ignoring it, people are dying. And so we have to take the liver to the point where it's just as important as the brain and the heart and everything like that. And I remember the looks I used to get when people would say, oh, you should write a book. And I was in the middle of writing it. And I said, oh, I'm actually writing a book right now. It'll be out in the next year. Oh my God, what's it about? Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Oh, okay. Good luck with that. Just like, really? Oh, wow, that sounds really boring. So I think even when I discussed my book, it was like, people were like, oh, I can't wait to read it. What's it about? And they're like, I'll pass. Right. So it's just so I think there's part of that I think is really, really important. And that happened with your father and that happened with this one patient. So here we are, 3 fabulous women that all have a story. Imagine how many more millions of people have that same story. And they're 5 years out, they're 6 years out, they're 7 years out. And they're not aware of the ticking time bomb that's going on in their body.
No, that's such a critical point. And I think in addition to that, we're seeing a stark rise in fatty liver disease in children as well. And you talked about this a little bit the other day that, with adults, they have progressed over time and we're starting to see, like stage 2 earlier. But with kids, we're seeing, I think it's 10% of kids today have fatty liver disease. And it's continuing to grow. And as a parent myself, that scares me. And one of the things that we're really focusing on is just educating children and families about the liver and about liver health and why it should become, such a, like when you hear about liver disease, as startling as it is when you hear about heart disease. Do you have a little bit of insight maybe on like the pediatric side of fatty liver disease?
Yeah. I think, it's really no different from treating a pediatric overweight or obese patient. It's really kind of the same messaging. The kid doesn't have any interest in the liver, nor does the kid typically have any clue what's going on. And also the kid may not, depending on the age, might not have any interest in losing weight. It might just be like, well, this is it. This is who I am, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but like there's very, very clear data that the most important factor in that child being able to kind of change their habits, lose weight, etc., is going to be mom and dad. That's the most important factor, much more important than anything else. I've had people say like, oh, if the school lunch program were better, that could help our kids. But if the school lunch program were perfect and the child went home to a really unhealthy environment and mom and dad are overweight or obese, that then makes the percentage of that child staying in an obese state very high. So I think, we just can't discount that. You have to be it's like a tightrope with kids because you never want to focus really on weight. You always want to focus on health because you just, it's a very different scenario. And really, when a parent says to me like, oh gosh, would you see my 13-year-old, because my 13-year-old little girl, and I've had this conversation a million times, my 13-year-old little girl, she's got gained so much weight. I think she's obese, but would you mind talking to her a little bit just about healthy habits? And my response is always like, has she talked to you about this? Has she told you, Mom, I'm really uncomfortable. I really want to lose weight. I don't know how to do it. And the answer typically is no, she says nothing. Okay, then the best thing you can do is you can show her what are healthy habits without saying, hey, look at what I'm doing. I'm eating more vegetables. You just do it. So I think that's really important, and it's very age dependent as well. So we just have to communicate to our kids in a manner that's appropriate to them. And the majority of the time, it's really counseling the parents.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And that's why we are actually kicking off a year-long family health initiative. And because we believe it really does start in the home. And it starts, I know for me, even my dad, all of our food choices, a lot of our like just general lifestyle choices, they start from a young age in your home, and you mirror what your parents do. Or the kids aren't the ones buying those products that are being put in the home either. So we're really excited. We're kicking off on June 24th in almost, a month, a little under a month here. Our Healthy Thanksgiving in June, we're calling it. We're hoping it'll become a tradition. And it's centered on all aspects. And it really going back to COVID. COVID really amplified a lot of existing like epidemics that we were already seeing. Addiction,
right,
obesity, mental health, like COVID just kind of exacerbated a lot of that. And we're saying, you know what, it's time to get back on track. Like we're getting off the couch. People are getting vaccinated. Masks are coming off. The weather's getting warmer. We can go outside. So what we're encouraging families to do, and we're going to have like monthly challenges, throughout the year, but is get together as a family, cook together as a family, make it fun for your kids, teach them, like you said, don't base it in weight and kind of that outward appearance. Base it on how do you feel on the inside. Here are foods that are going to give you more energy so that you can go play your sports. So we're really excited about this. We're going to have some healthy recipes. We're going to have some cooking videos, some ideas for folks to kind of get out there and like get together as a family and just have some physical activity. And then there's a piece with gratitude as well. So we're going to, be doing some giving back, donating some healthy meals to a local women's shelter also, and doing some things to really thank our medical heroes as well. But the root of that is really in starting as a family unit, kind of getting on track with healthy habits. And something you mentioned earlier is it's not about kind of solving all the world's problems in one day, but start to take like small little steps. Or maybe there's just tiny little changes you can make in your daily routines that will make a big impact over time.
Yeah. I know with my kids, I don't know if this is like karma for all the people that I tried to change their behavior, but my kids are like, it's almost impossible to get them to eat a fruit or a vegetable. Fruits are a little bit easier. The vegetables are a little bit more difficult. And every tactic I was trying just wasn't working. So now I've gotten into colors, right? So I'm not going to say like, oh, I want you to eat your broccoli, or, oh, I want you to eat your carrot. Kids, I have 2 boys, and boys are competitive, 5-year-old and 8-year-old. So when we're having dinner, I'll say, whoever eats the most colors tonight gets $1. right? And then that's like, it's not like, oh, whoever eats the most vegetables. No, whoever gets the most color in. And I will make it a point to get them like different colors. I'll put a carrot there. I'll put it like maybe some tomato sauce on some pasta. Maybe there's a black bean, but I try to get the colors in and try and get that. And I also think you mentioned, Gina, cooking with your kids, which I think is really important, but engaging them in the shopping period as well. So when kids feel like they're heard at the grocery store and they can make decisions, and of course, yes, sometimes they want Fruit Loops, but when they can make the decision of like, okay, you can pick out 3 healthy foods and I'm not picking it out, you're picking it out, and we'll make it however you want. They're just more engaged in the process, I think.
No, for sure. I found that with my son. I mentioned like he's, slightly overweight. I believe he's on the path to fatty liver disease because he has like high triglycerides and kind of on the path to pre-diabetes. And he loves eating eggs. So he started to, and he likes to experiment. He's a boy. So I've let him kind of cook eggs however he wants, like mix in tomatoes with them if he wants or what, and he's enjoying it. And then he wants to eat the food as well. So it's healthier instead of, reaching for, And in my house, it's Lucky Charms is like they're kind of Fruit Loops.
Oh yeah, I get it. I get it.
And the other thing too that we didn't hit on is, so sugar has such a impact, fructose in particular, on the diet. And there is so much added sugar in foods today. And a lot of that sugar consumption comes from drinks, from, juices, sodas. So one of the things that we're really focused on is drinking more water as well. So Linda, maybe if you could real briefly talk a little bit. I know for you, changing your diet was and still is a struggle to this day. So I don't know if you have a few little comments on maybe some things that you've picked up from Kristin's book or just in your general, just things that have worked for you.
I am the world's worst. I'm Italian, full-blooded Italian, and you would equate being Italian as being a good cook. And somehow I did not get that gene. And I married my husband because he is a good cook. And I'm not allowed to eat that kind of food anymore. So I had to learn how to cook all over again. And it's not my favorite thing. And I'm also a very picky eater and I have some food allergies. So that doesn't help either. So I've been struggling with this healthy eating. And it got to the point where I felt like I was in food jail. So that's what I called it. And so I took a class through the community college called Luscious, Lightning, Low-Fat, Quick Meals. And it changed my life because it taught me how to make low-fat meals that still tasted good, but it took the fat out, but you added in the seasoning to make it have that mouthfeel of having the fat. So it made a difference, and it made me have some more food choices to eat instead of the same old baked chicken that I was getting really bored of. But I decided that to eat healthy and to eat well-balanced meals was really important to my liver health. And if I want to turn this liver around, I have to make this choice. And sometimes I do fall off the wagon, and I made the wrong choice a few times where I had regular pasta and I might have had some candy. I did eat a whole bag of black jelly beans. That was a mistake. I didn't feel too good after that, and I learned my lesson about that. I still have nightmares about that, as a matter of fact. I had one last night where I ate a whole bag of jelly beans. I don't know if it's because we were going to do this podcast today, but the diet is really hard, and you have to really be invested in it. And I'm not saying that it's easy. Anything that you want to succeed at, it's a lot of work, whether it's a friendship or a marriage or a job or a career or losing weight or being healthy. And this is a lifestyle change. It's forever. And you have to make it doable. You have to make it work for you so that you will stay on it for life. And if it means having a piece of candy once a week, if you fit it in, the nutritionist was like, look, sugar's not always the best option for you, but if it's going to make you stay on the healthy diet and you want to have a candy bar once a week, then you have the candy bar, but you can't have it every day. You can have it every once in a while. So enjoy it. And now I'm at the point where I could go months without having a candy bar, but every now and again I'm at the store and I see a Milky Way and it's calling my name and I have to have it, and I'll buy it and I'll eat it and then I'm fine for a while, because then I eat it and I'm like, it doesn't taste the way I remember it tasting. It doesn't really taste so good. But the food struggle is hard.
I think the other point you brought up that was great is just the cultural aspect of things and where we come from. I was thinking the other day, I have a young girl, she's 23 and she lives with me and she's like my daughter and she works for me full time and she's Italian. And the other day she came down in the kitchen and I had spaghetti in a bowl and I had red sauce and she looked at that and she's like, is that real spaghetti? I'm like, oh, no. It's almond flour spaghetti. She's like, no, thanks. I'm Italian. I'm like, just try it. Just try it. She's like, nah, it's insulting. And I get it, right? Like I'm half Dominican. And I just remember trying to convince my father, who as a child ate white rice in Dominican Republic every day, every meal. Like, it's like, hey, Dad, like, why don't you consider maybe some brown rice? And he just kind of looked at me like, why would I have brown rice? So the solution there was over time, just mixing the brown rice with the white rice. And then over time, the mix got a little bit greater on the brown rice. And over time, he didn't enjoy the white rice anymore, just like you didn't enjoy that Milky Way that much. Exactly. So Linda, you talked about like, I had all these black jelly beans and I didn't feel good afterwards. So I think sometimes we have to also listen to our body. Like when you have something that's very nutrient dense, you'll feel really good about it. And when you have things like sugar and things like that, and I know we're talking about sugar, you feel good during the process and then you feel like crap. Right. So it's just, and that's where the cycle is. So for many people, they feel good. They're eating it. All the endorphins are opening up. Everything's great. My blood sugar's going up. Then I feel like crap. And in order to get back that great feeling, I have to eat more of this. That's a real challenging thing. But yeah, I mean, anything you do is really difficult. I think weight loss is difficult. I think maintaining weight loss is even more difficult by far. And I think we always have to strive for progress and not perfection, right? I agree that if you want to have a candy bar once a week, have the candy bar. It's not the one candy bar that we see in the studies that are like, oh, well, that was it. Now look at, Linda's put on 50 pounds. No, it's not the one candy bar. It's the multiple candy bars. So I think we have to get that in our head and get rid of the shame and kind of the disgust we have with ourselves when we're like, oh, I had that candy bar. I can't believe it. You had a candy bar. So what? It's one candy bar. Do good the rest of the day.
Right.
No, I love that. I think that's a great note to end on, Kristin. I think that's a really positive and uplifting message too. Like you said, that's, so what, as long as you're, And I love that message. And I love that approach and that mindset as well. So before we wrap up, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't hit on.
No, the only thing I'd say is I just want to tell you, Gina, I'm so impressed with your nonprofits and the upcoming campaign you're doing, the Thanksgiving in June. I love that. Makes me think of all the people that come to me in December and say, hey, can I get an appointment with you like January 10th? Because I really want to talk about New Year's resolutions. And I'll say, no, get the appointment with me tomorrow, right? Like if you're going to make change and you're going to start looking at the structure of how you make that change, you start today. You don't wait for the calendar to tell you when to start. And that's exactly what you're doing with this Healthy Thanksgiving in June. And I think that what you're doing, your organization is doing for people like Linda, for everyone else, I just applaud you. And I think it's great that your father's journey prompted you to really kind of embrace this, because there are a million of your father and a million Lindas out there. And I think we need to reach them to provide that community that is so necessary to make really sustainable behavior change.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all those comments greatly. And for those who may be listening that, are struggling with, liver disease, we do have our NASH Knowledge Liver Disease Support Group. That information can be found on nash-now.org. And Kristin, I want to give you an opportunity to plug your book as well and let folks know where they can find it and your website.
Yeah, my website is just my name. So it's KristinKirkpatrick.com, spelled with an I. You can get the book at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Amazon. If you go to my website, I can give you some guidance on how to get it as well. And also a great place to contact me. So Linda, if you go to my website and you go to contact, I'll see that question about the food allergies and things like that. So absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Kristin. Thank you so much, Linda. Really appreciate both of you spending the time with us today. And for all of you listening, thank you for being with us. This is our Love Your Liver podcast, where we give our livers just a little bit of extra love and we talk about all things liver. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.